Tonight on Cosmic Cantina, we're talking about background people. Are there soulless, sociopathic husks of human beings existing within our world? Or could there be an invading alien race? Let's find out together, unless you're one of them. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and every week I go to my favorite bar, Cosmic Cantina, and kick back with my co-hosts, Josh Golombeski and Matt O'Connor. We talk about aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, ancient cultures, and anything from the unseen world that needs a little illumination. All right, welcome to Cosmic Cantina. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and tonight we are still at home, but we are drinking. What are you guys drinking?
Well, tonight I found my favorite gluten-free beer again. It's called Riccoli. It's made by two brothers in Colorado, so, I'm a little biased, and I love it very, very, very much. It's my new favorite. I'm going all in on it. I hope they sponsor us one day.
Lovely. I'm still getting through my box of Coronas here. I still got like 4 or 5 left, so...
Cheers.
Which is good, because I like Corona. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
it's gluten-free, too.
I'm drinking a margarita. Still working on my tequila bottle.
Ooh, nice. Nice. We're going through our supplies during this quarantine.
I know. We're almost out. All right, so let's get to what we're going to talk about tonight. I came across, I came across this a long time ago, but it kind of crossed in my path because somebody brought it up in a conversation. The idea of background people. So before we define what that is, I want to set the stage with an article, of course. And the article says, are we living in a simulation? MIT professor claims the scenario is more likely than not. MIT researcher Rizwan Virk's new book, The Simulation Hypothesis, he probes the idea further, even examining how long it might take before humans could use today's technology to construct their own simulated reality. Okay, so one of his big theories is that the idea that a particle is in one of the multiple states all the time, and you don't know that it's there unless you observe the particle, meaning that at all times, all these different particles, or, if you want to look at it this way, at all times there's all different possibilities of one situation happening. But that only one situation happens because you look at it. And that is his experiment with quantum physics. And that's what he's been working on, is the idea that all of them exist at a time, but the only one that exists is the one that you set your eyes on and you observe. That's very interesting because this plays into the idea of this concept called background people.
It reminds me of, what's that old, I don't know where it's from, but that old adage of, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Exactly.
That's kind of the concept that he's working on. So I'm going to transition to Dolores Cannon. So Dolores Cannon is a world-renowned hypnotherapist. She's the one who coined the phrase background people because she puts people under these deep regressions, and several of her clients have come to her with this idea that there's a simulated reality going on, and most of the people that you see are background people. So what are background people? Background people are, they have energy, they're alive in a sense, but their soul isn't in their body. Their soul is like a slave to like this system. And they're there to fill in the gaps, to fill in the spaces, to fill in the space that you're living in. And basically that's what backdrop people are. And she writes about it. But it's a really interesting concept because this started a lot of people discussing, well, what does that mean? Like, what is a backdrop person? Does this person interact with me? Are they fake? Well, according to Dolores Cannon, they are real, but they don't really have a soul. But they do have energy, and they exist, and they function, and they do everything that they can to survive, which seems a little bit like a psychopath. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yes, I think that sounds like a psychopath. Is another term for background people an NPC, like a non-player character from the video game world?
It's used as like online as like this really interesting like insult, calling people NPCs of being oh, you're not very woke. Like, you don't know as much as I do.
Like you're a basic bitch.
Yeah.
How dare
Like you haven't done as much research as I had, so you're just like floating in the background. You don't know shit like I know. It's like this hugely like egotistical, narcissistic kind of like view, which is interesting because when you think about the real sort of definition of, and it took me a while to get my head around it, to be honest, but it is like this sociopath kind of thing where these soulless people who don't really care about anyone else and just kind of floating through life, interested in their own existence kind of thing. But yeah, that term NPC is kind of used as like this insult as well.
Well, I mean, I could see that would be the case. I mean, just to point that out. But you have to think about all the people you've met in your life. Josh and I were talking about this before the podcast, and we're like, I think we've dated some of these people.
Oh, you're going to say, well, I think Matt's one of those people. Fuck.
Yeah, no, I didn't say that. No, but that doesn't mean that they don't know what's going on. It's just that their path on this life is not to evolve. It's to cause chaos so that the people around them have the opportunity to evolve. So if you think about it, if you're really in a game, so an NPC, right? So you're really in a game, and you need to get to a certain level, you're going to have obstacles in front of you. And I think that's what Dolores Cannon's idea of it was, that these people exist because of that, for evolutionary sakes. But they're sort of slaves to the system. I don't know. It's strange. There's a lot of definitions out there, but I think it's really interesting, especially now when we're at a stage where we are at a critical point in our society where we have to evolve. And I think people are really pointing out, like, who's awake or not. So it's an interesting conversation to have.
Very interesting. Go on, Mr. O'Connor.
Well, I was just going to, like, when I was looking at it, I was in kind of two minds about the whole thing. Like, trying to find a definitive definition of what this is. So many people have these kind of differing views of what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is like, again, I came across person after person describing background people, and it was just this hugely like, they're not as good as me because I am of a higher vibrational setting, and they're just like out of a lower vibrational setting, and they don't know all the stuff that I know. And it was just seemed like this really like interesting, I don't know, egotistical again kind of like view of the world, like, oh, these people have nothing to do with my life, so they must be like fake or something, you know? It's just like a really odd way of looking at the world. Yeah. And it kind of reminded me of you guys heard of gang stalking?
Yes.
It kind of reminded me, and I think that's kind of a kind of a sad psychosis. It's had the same kind of ring to it as that, where you believe like, oh, all these people around me, they're like watching me and they're following me and stuff. It seems like it's of a similar vein, where it's like, oh, all these people around me are just like fake humans, just like shells of people who aren't, you know, who don't have.
That could be mental illness. That could also be mental illness. A little paranoia going on there. That's the beginnings of. But
I don't think it started off as that. I think it started off as just like a philosophical way of looking at the world and your own existence, whereas people kind of maybe took it too literally. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's that, but then there's also like, why are there people that can do horrible things and get away with it, or think horrible things, or be horrible, and it's not a big deal? They become actually, it's encouraged in our American culture and most of the West to be able to trump all emotions, right? And so that's somebody with no empathy.
Interesting choice of words, but okay.
So is that the key word right there? Is that what it is? Background people or NPCs lack empathy.
They lack empathy.
Connection? Is that what makes you a background person? I mean, literally.
Right. Well, because, according to the stuff I found for definition, and then when I looked into it, I thought, okay, well, what's the definition of a psychopath? So a New York article, literally the word psychopath means suffering of souls. Interesting.
Ooh, that's interesting.
So, this is the definition from a 1941 book called The Mask of Sanity, which became the foundation of modern science, and the idea of the psychopath. It's stated here, brilliant, charming, but nonetheless carries disaster lightly in hand, deceptive, predatory in nature, concealing behind a perfect idea of itself, of normal emotion, fine intelligence, social responsibility, a grossly disabled and irresponsible personality underneath. That's the definition of a psychopath from a 1941 book that became the foundation of modern science. So it sounds sort of like a lot of people that can function in society but have no empathy for anybody else. And that is, okay, so a lot of the studies that they've done are males that are in prison. So 25% of males in North American prisons are considered psychopaths. 1% of males in our normal population in America are considered psychopaths. That's about 1 million psychopaths just walking around in America alone. There's a very, very low percentage of psychopaths of women. So
really?
Sorry. But, I mean, that still might mean like 300,000 or something, but there's still, like, it's just lower than 1% of psychopaths of women.
Did you ever read that book, The Psychopath Test by John Ronson, the English author? Really fascinating book where he kind of goes into there's like a test. I don't know, I forget what it's called, but it's like a psychopath test. And depending on how you score on this test, you can find out whether you're a psychopath or not.
Interesting. How did you score?
Not good.
Oh, no.
I didn't ever take the test. But it's just a really interesting book, and he like interviews actual psychopaths and stuff, and it's really like oddly creepy how like kind and how they want to be your friend, and like they tell you anything you want to hear, and pretty fascinating book if you want to pick it up. But
I can make a list of people.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
In my life, I could think, just think of 50 people, I bet like 3 of them you'd be like, 50-50.
Yeah,
50-50's like.
But he was saying like one of the quotes from the book is he was saying like, if you're concerned about whether you're a psychopath or not, you're probably not a psychopath. And it's just
that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Well,
anyway.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
No psychopaths on this podcast.
But you know what? I mean, in some level, I'm almost envious, because imagine not really caring what other people think. Wouldn't life be easier in a lot of ways? It might not be as fulfilling, but like I wouldn't. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly beating myself up over what other people think of me. As much as I'd like to say, like, I don't care what people think. You do to a certain level. That's just basic human nature. And it'd be amazing to operate without worrying about that. But also, what's weird about being a psychopath is a lot of them get to really high positions in power too. Is something I've read before. So what does that say? Is that just our system, or is that because they just can make decisions and not care about it? And that's actually could be beneficial for leadership. I'm not saying psychopaths are good. I'm not pro psychopath here, guys. I'm just trying to point out.
Yeah, you better not be.
It's interesting you brought that up, because I was talking to someone who works with terminally ill patients, and they were talking about how much it takes a toll on their own emotions, having to like just watch people die over and over again.
Yeah,
and they were saying like, oh, it'd be so much easier if I was a psychopath, and I just like did. All I had to do was do my job, and then people die. Okay, next one, and move on to the next one. And I didn't have to care about this all the time. It'd be so much easier.
Yeah.
Wow. It just got me thinking about that. Like, it'd be interesting work if you were like a diagnosed psychopath, and you're like, that was one of the prerequisites for working with something that would like destroy anyone else, like to continually go to work every day. And anyway, sorry, tangent.
Well, yeah, no, but that's really interesting. But also, like this book states that more psychopaths are in individualistic type societies like the West. Winner take all aspects like the American culture nurtures that idea of psychopath, because they can thrive. They can like pretend to be normal, and they win because the idea is who can get to the top the fastest. And the fastest you get to the top is when you have no emotional drag, right? Like you don't care what anybody thinks. So it kind of nurtures that. And so you think about, all right, so let's just think about this for a second. So we've pitched a couple things. We've talked about One, if we're living in a simulated universe, the only thing